Thank you so much. I mean, what a wonderful introduction. You're making us sound like there's so much happening. Thank you for my panel for joining us. I'm excited to be here. I think it's a very interesting conversation that we're going to have today. We are going to be focusing on seed stage funding and obviously from a South African landscape, and I'm really interested to hear what my panel has to say about that. And basically, before we delve deep into that, I just sort of want your understanding, especially from your level of expertise, right? When we look at seed stage funding in the South African context, from the COVID point of view, do you think that it was rolled out successfully, essentially? And then I suppose after that, we can just basically look at it from an overall context in South Africa, right? So would you perhaps, Renier, want to share your thoughts on that?
So are you referring to how seed funding went during the COVID period?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, so I think, look, COVID affected a lot of things, but when it comes to tech and digital startups, obviously a lot of new opportunities came around because people realized the acceleration of digital technology will just be much faster, which increased the opportunity for a lot of startups to actually see that dip that Abu was talking about going up faster, quicker. And then investors becoming more interested in those startups. So, but is it a COVID thing or not? I just think generally the startup ecosystem in South Africa, partly to a lot of people that have been participating in events like this, have really matured over the last few years. And you know, money follows good deals, and I think there are a lot more good deals around. A lot of startups actually getting the fundamentals right of what it means to build a startup that can scale, and as such, we're seeing a lot more activity in that space. So COVID's definitely helped certain businesses, obviously knocked a few other startups that maybe had to pivot a bit. But see, that's the nature of entrepreneurs, they're creative. So I think in all, it probably was had a positive impact on accelerating our growth as a startup nation.
All right, so you touched on the positive elements of that, but we are aware that there were probably entrepreneurs and small business owners who really struggled, right? If we look at South Africa, I mean, if you look at the majority of our entrepreneurs, not a lot of them have resources, capital, they tend to struggle. A lot of them come from rural areas and so forth. So Abud, what would you say in that context? He speaks of the successful element of it. What would you say, let's play the devil's advocate. There are people that struggled. Can you maybe talk on that?
Yeah, I struggled too. It was a tough year last year. And as a family business, this is the business I was referencing earlier, we lost 50% of our business. And we had to find ways of keeping the lights on. And I think the retail sector, the travel sector, the restaurant business, the coffee shops, yeah, I've seen there's a lot of empty shops in Sandton City, unfortunately. I think it is an opportunity to reset. And that's the way we've got to approach this. It's an opportunity now to reinvent ourselves as an economy. It is an opportunity working from home, working in these lockdown conditions, upskilling ourselves and learning new skills, understanding what is required of us in the future. And there's this school of thought. Elon Musk is one of the proponents of this. Peter Thiel is another one. University is not all that valuable. You can learn those skills elsewhere. University is good for meeting people, hanging out with friends, but in terms of learning, you can go and learn what you need to learn at your desk at home. And so I think we need to embrace this new way of learning and go and adopt and adapt to this new future that is being created.
All right. So Zulé, what would you say for entrepreneurs who are basically struggling to knock on the doors of corporates, who there's sort of like a disconnect where government is concerned? How can we help these young people in terms of seed funding?
I think it all starts with relationships.
Okay.
Building relationships, not necessarily going out there and you're knocking on the door, I need money, I need funding, but more about reaching out, talking about what your solution is, what is the problem that you're solving, being very clear between something that's a cool idea and something that is a solution. Because in South Africa and in Africa, we need more solutions than cool ideas. So it starts with a relationship. It starts with, like Abu said, learning. Learn from mentors. Find good mentors that can also create a bigger network for you. Yes, government does make it difficult sometimes, but there's also great support from people like Tia, and organizations like that make partnerships with angel funds like Jozi Angels. And that is really something that can push it forward. So for me, and in my experience, it's all about the relationships first. Ask for the advice, learn, and then the money will follow.
100%. I can agree. And
can I share a story?
Yes.
So we met in 2018, all right? And Zulé was 2018 or early 2019. At the time, Zulé was looking for funding for LocumBase, and we weren't, unfortunately, at the time in a position to support her. We kept in touch, and she then reached out again in mid-COVID last year, April 2020. Everyone's cooped up in lockdown, and she gave me an update on where the business was. And she'd gone from almost 0 to 100 in the year or so that we'd known each other. And that was super impressive. Over 700 healthcare professionals onboarded, discussions with Netcare and a few other companies. And then we went through that assessment again. And the second time around, we got it right. And we were able to invest in the business. But it is very much about the relationship. We couldn't, unfortunately, help her out first time around, but we got lucky second time around.
All right, that's fantastic. So now we talk about relationships and the importance of having the right skill set, but let's take it back a little bit, right? I believe that in the South African startup ecosystem, we have sort of like a risk-aversive approach to investments in South Africa. So I'll give you an example. A lot of entrepreneurs, or maybe not entrepreneurs, let's speak about people in the private sector. They would rather invest in businesses that are already established, right, in a lot of the cases. And when we look at South Africans, people who are in business, they'd rather invest in shares and property. They never really think about startups, right? How do we get these people to shift their mindset and say, instead of always investing in property and instead of always looking into shares or businesses that have already developed, how do we let them invest in startups? Abu, do you want to maybe talk to that?
Yeah, I think it's important that it starts with education. Getting people to understand that this is a new asset class. There's potential in this as an asset class. And those exits that I was referring to earlier just talk to that potential. And the investors, whether it be angels or venture capitalists, should see their investment as a broad portfolio. You should have X amount of property, you should have X amount of listed assets, you should have X amount of bonds, depending on your risk profile. But then you should also have exposure to the innovation economy through startups. And that's really the education process that we're taking investors on through Jozi Angels.
All right. And Renier, do you maybe want to add on to what he touched on?
Yeah, sure. I think something that's very important is the definition of what a startup is.
Yes.
And I think that's often very loosely used as any new small business. I think Paul Graham from Y Combinator has probably one of the best essays on that topic, and it's called Startup Equals Growth, and I'd highly recommend everybody to go read it. It's quite old, but very valuable. And he speaks about startup being a hyper-growth business. So that is a business that grows 10% per week. Now, any restaurant or physical store would struggle to grow at that rate. And the reason for it is that startups, in his definition, are companies that use technology to hyperscale extremely fast. Now, if we would take a moment and just say, okay, that is the definition of a startup, and we explain the risk and the potential upside of a business like that, and both founders and investors understand it, I think it becomes a really attractive investment opportunity as part of your portfolio, as Abu said. And I think that is a very important thing. Do we need millions of startups? No, I think we need a few startups in South Africa. I think we need a lot more entrepreneurs building small businesses, but those are two different categories. And I think something that's dangerous is for us to put all of them in the same pool and say it's the same thing, because it's not the same thing. The kind of steps you take as a startup founder that needs to hyperscale is completely different than the process you would take to actually build a small sustainable business that employs 25 people, pays taxes in a respectable business. So the one's not better than the other, it's just a different thing. So when we talk about seed capital, I think it's important to kind of have the conversation on both sides, both the founders, and say, look, we need to build hyper-scalable businesses that can attract large amounts of revenue and make investors really wealthy. And on the other side as well, I mean, there's a different pool for entrepreneurs and a different pool for startups. And I think that would really just help accelerate the process of us building more startups.
All right. So you touched on the point on capital. Now, I don't know if you've noticed with a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, there's just this fixation over capital. It seems to be the one thing that people think is the most important thing. It is important. Obviously, to kickstart your business, you need funding, right? But obviously, as somebody in this space, there's so much more to that. Can you maybe touch on other elements in terms of what would sustain a startup well in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when a startup is looking for funding, often we have a bit of a conversation, you realize they don't have a funding problem, they have a customer problem. So you can either fund your business through getting more customers and growing your revenue, or funding. But typically the funny thing is, as soon as you get more customers, it becomes easier to raise funding.
True.
And I think what most founders struggle with, and this is real, and I have a lot of empathy for this, there's a lot of risk in building a business, right? And by raising a bit of funding before you take the next step reduces some of that risk and actually moves that risk over to someone else. I think startup founders that I've seen make the most progress are those ones that are prepared to take on a bit of risk themselves, put themselves out there, build something, get some traction, get some customers, get some feedback, and then all of a sudden the investment conversation becomes significantly easier. So my advice for all startups would be in the early stages to focus a bit less on funding and focus on what you have in your hands, like how can you hustle, how can you make your plan, can you ask someone to do something for free, can you pull a favor, can you try and figure out how to do it yourself, and the more you think like that, the more progress you make, it easier it becomes to raise funding. So I think also just a final point on that, we're talking about tech startups, and then people think it's all about tech. It's not about tech. It's about solving a problem in a new, innovative way and using tech to scale that to a broad audience. So it's not about the tech. So a lot of startup founders get stuck and they go, I can't go forward because I need to raise money to build my tech. But if you look at it from a perspective to say, well, it's not about the tech, it's about the solution,
Innovation, yes.
then you can become creative and use WhatsApp and email and Google Forms and all kinds of hacks to make sure you start delivering the service to prove there's a market, to raise funding, and then build the product.
Okay, 100%. No, I hear you. And Abu, I just want you to touch on one thing. You speak about a family business that's been existing for 81 years, right? In terms of the risks that your family business took, can you perhaps take people through the learnings in that perspective?
Yeah, I think maybe the values that we've established as a business as a result. So I think lean startup is something that's only really come into the public domain last 15 years, give or take. But I think whether it be my grandfather, my dad, my great-grandfather who started the business, they've been frugal is the word, I guess, quite tight with their purse strings. So they've made sure that they are running the business with very little overhead costs. And they keep an eye on that. The other metric they keep an eye on is cash flow. And cash flow is hugely important for any business that is a young business that is trying to just navigate life on a day-to-day basis. And the other thing I've learned is what you touched on, relationships. In a family business, everyone is family, whether it be the people you're working alongside or your customers. And the relationship is more valuable than the transaction.
True.
So those are the, I guess, core values that I've learned in doing business and from my family business.
Interesting. I'm also interested to know, Zulé, when you first knocked on Jozi Angel's door, and it was a bit unfortunate that they couldn't support you then, sort of what measures did you take to ensure that the next time you come back to them, you're prepared and you're able to form that relationship and get the assistance you need?
It's actually an interesting story how I actually got Abu's telephone number the very first time, way before LocumBase was even something online, it was something on paper. And I'd always have this, doing research on the people that you want to work with. But for me, my mission was to push it as far as I can push it without needing any external money. But needing external support is there from day one. So for me, knocking on Abu's door the first time, it wasn't for money. It was for reaching out, building network. What can I learn from you? Me coming from I'm a pure hustler. I don't come from a corporate background. I've always built businesses, little businesses, something a little bit bigger. So for me, really learning almost the formalities of the startup and the funding space really started with me reaching out to people like Abu to learn more about it. And there's a lot of luck involved in being an entrepreneur, but without preparation, you can't use the luck, right? So when it came time where I could go back to Abu and his team and the people that he works with, I knew I needed to be properly prepared. So that's the piece of advice I would give to entrepreneurs. Prepare, otherwise you can't use your luck.
It makes perfect sense, right? But you speak of the support that they afforded you. Can you maybe delve deep into it, right? So we could talk about capital, for instance, right? Just to kickstart your business. What are the other resources that were given to you that will help, that were able to help elevate your business?
Something that's really important for us and for me, because I don't come from that corporate and financial background, is the people who are involved with Jozi Angel specifically can bring knowledge that I don't have. As a founder, there's actually very few things I'm very good at, but I need to focus on those things that I'm very good at and reach out to my network for things that I'm not good at. Like, for instance, for me, that financial modeling side, or really deeply understanding your terms of your investment conversations that you're having, and that is almost more valuable to me than the funding. Yes, you need funding to push it further than you can on your own with your own money and the bootstrapping that you've done. But that knowledge, I mean, you can go do an MBA and it costs a whole lot of money, but if you reach out to the right people, you can get that education much better in a much shorter time, and not really pay for it in cash, but pay for it in the hard work that you're following on with once you have that knowledge.
All right, thank you for that experience. Renier, I'm just interested to know, right, as an entrepreneur, what's your journey been like in terms of working with other startups when we talk about funding?
So I think one of the things that I think would help our ecosystem tremendously is more people that have walked the entrepreneurial journey go back and walk that journey with other founders. It's hard to translate what you learn into blogs or books or whatever, because a lot of it is situational based, right? And I think no matter what we do, we always see the world through our lenses, be it our experiences, our backgrounds, and beliefs and values, right? And being able to walk with other founders and give my perspective on how I think certain situations would play out, I think is sometimes really helpful for them to get unstuck. I always think that the number one reason why startups fail is the founders get stuck for too long. Like they have literally an amount of money before the business dies, and every day they get stuck is a day closer to that cliff. So other entrepreneurs, putting some time aside, and that could be as simple as a coffee once every month for an hour where we're checking like, how's it going, what are you struggling with, like what is the next thing you're doing, I think is extremely helpful for founders to actually see the different perspective, see their problem from the experience of entrepreneurs' eyes, and then to get unstuck. And that kind of speaks to Zulé's point, like it's not, it's hard to say what it is. That doesn't come in a program. That's not an educational thing. It's not something you can create a course on and tell people just go watch these 5 videos and you'll get it doesn't work like that.
True.
So really just, I want to encourage all entrepreneurs that have walked the journey for a few years to find that other entrepreneur that you can just build a relationship with and just check in every now and again and ask them how they're doing. I think that if we create a culture that does that, I think our entire ecosystem would just be fast-tracked.
100%, I agree with that.
On that, you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know, and as Renier says, there's no course for that. There's no real book for that. And the only way that you're going to learn about that is the other perspectives that you learn from incubators, programs, mentors. And like you say, founders get stuck because they focus so hard on the vision, which they have to do. But that's why the external perspectives are so important. Find an entrepreneur that's possibly in a whole different industry than you are to learn from their perspective. So yes, I think I agree with you. It's so important to find somebody you can also trust and actually really be honest with. You know, when things are crap, it's usually very crap in an entrepreneurial situation. But when it's wonderful, it's also fantastically wonderful. And it is important to be honest. It's important to be honest about where you are in your journey.
If I can add something to that, we've realized in our programs that the two places entrepreneurs learn the most is they learn the most from other entrepreneurs, even people in the same program, like coming up with ideas to solve their problems, and they learn the most doing things. So we have all these incubators in South Africa, well, across Africa, that are predominantly focusing on programs, you know, putting together educational content, and those things definitely have their place. I mean, we can't take that out of the system. They're very important.
Yes.
But I think we're missing a big part, that entrepreneurs learn from other entrepreneurs and they learn from practical experience. So if we create more events like this, if we create more spaces like Workshop 17, where people can just work together on, or not work together, but just interact and share ideas, I think it's going to be extremely helpful for founders.
100%, I agree with you. So I feel like the focus is more on entrepreneurs, right? Let's speak about investors. How do we encourage them to sort of plow money into these small businesses? Because it's one thing for entrepreneurs to knock on the doors of the private sector and ask their family and friends for funding, but how do we encourage the other side to sort of plow money? Abu, do you maybe want to touch on that?
Yeah, let me approach that from the entrepreneur's perspective. So often investors don't know they're investors, all right? And my advice to you is go and jump onto LinkedIn. Go and find the person, like Zulé did, that you think would be a good partner in your business, whether they're investors now or not. Reach out to them and say, look, this is what I'm up to. Would be good to bounce things off you on a periodic basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or so on. Get them to be your mentor. Hopefully that relationship evolves, and then from mentor they become advisors on your business, and then potentially investors in your business as well. Yeah, it's about the evolution. It's about relationships, but also the evolution of relationships. So that would be my advice. And yeah, whether it be family, friends, people you don't know, just speak to them. Go and pitch your idea and see what happens.
All right. Zulé, do you maybe want to add on to that? So in terms of investors, because we focused on the entrepreneurial journey, right? How do we get these investors to sort of plow money into these businesses? Because I think there's sort of, it's a two-way thing, right? It's not just one-sided. We're not just entrepreneurs expecting to get funding. It works the other way. There needs to be a trust element. So how do we get investors to come to the table and be like, I am confident enough to invest in this business because ABC?
It takes a special kind of person to be an angel investor and a seed investor. I mean, the risk is massive. There's a 1%, 10, maybe 5 or 10% chance that it might be successful. So you have to find, firstly, you have to find people who are in this game already. But if you want to go, well, in my opinion, if you want to get somebody into that game, you have to build that trust to where they have to believe you, they have to back you, and that is also why it's important to find seed and angel investors that are in it with you. It's not just, here's the money, okay, good luck, send me a report once a month. You have to find those people and the people who want to help the ecosystem, not just with funding, but helping the ecosystem with sharing their knowledge. I think a lot of people may have like individuals who are angel investors and they don't even know they're angel investors yet because they want to be part of something exciting. They just don't know how yet. So it's also part of a founder's job to ignite that excitement in them, that excitement of the technological changes, the innovation, the new solutions that we are making in these spaces, and especially coming out of South Africa and Africa, if you've got a lot of challenges, there's lots of opportunity for great solutions. And if you can find those people who are aligned with your vision and with what you want to achieve, that's the start of it. Even if they're not an angel investor in their own minds yet, they just don't know it.
I mean, trust is important. I mean, it's the one thing that underpins our whole financial sector. You put money into Standard Bank, 100 Rand, there's this expectation that you're going to get that 100 Rand back at some point in the future. So I think it's important, and we spoke about relationships. Investors tend to invest into concepts that they understand, but also people they can relate to. And this is the whole issue that's being lobbied at the current profile of investors locally, is that we don't have enough diversity, and we need more diversity, because you end up liking ideas, concepts, and people that you can relate to. And if there's, you end up liking people or you can relate to. I moved to Dubai in 2007, and all the South Africans there just hung out with each other because that's who they could relate to. And you see the same happening globally. And so we do need diversity across our investor base, so that we can get diversity funded across the ecosystem.
Do you perhaps want to touch on that, Renier? Because I can see.
So I absolutely agree with all the points. I actually have a separate point. We come to these conferences and we typically talk about how we need more investors and how we need more startups. But I realized something recently watching a development in the VC space in America. So the tech reporting in Silicon Valley is, it's 1 million times bigger than it is over here. And there's a VC firm that has had quite a bit of success called Andreessen Horowitz. And they used to dazzle reporters, take them on trips, take them to Vegas, go crazy and build relationships with them. In order to get these people to not only write about the stories about their startups, but also about the products. So actually 2 focuses. One, they need customers. So some of their startups are B2C customers or B2B customers. They need press. So these reporters would write about it. But on the other side, also they're getting on follow-on funding, right? And it's gone on to be such a valuable asset for them as a VC firm. They've now established an entire media division within the VC firm. So, and some people joke on Twitter, they say they are a media company now that monetizes through VC. So that's what they do. And having looked at that, I just realized if these guys have been around so long and they realize the value in that, and I'm not talking about spreading fake news and hopium,
Yes.
I'm talking about actually quality reporting. Then there's something to say for that. And I think, in South Africa we have a few publications, but I think there's a massive gap to get the tech reporting to not only go to the tech websites, but, be featured on some of the other business portals and really high quality business insights as to what these businesses are doing. Zulé's progress and story, as an example, is great. But why am I not reading about that on the business section of News24? Because someone on the outside who Abu is trying to convince to become an angel investor might see that article and go, you know what, there is something here. So, we've got tech websites, but perhaps it's time for this reporting to start filtering over into some of the other spaces to give it the kind of exposure which I believe it deserves. And I think there's a massive opportunity there.
I agree with you 100%. Abu, earlier on you also touched about LinkedIn being, an essential platform for investors to meet potential business owners or entrepreneurs. Can you share maybe other mediums in your experience, obviously your life spanning, your span in being an entrepreneur, other platforms that entrepreneurs can use where they can sort of engage with potential investors?
Yeah, so for many years I ran a non-profit called Venture Network. It was events-based. Unfortunately, during lockdown, we closed that business down. But events like this is a good opportunity for you to get to meet investors. Incubators, generally investors tend to hover around and gravitate to the incubators and accelerators, co-working spaces. I got an email yesterday from another portfolio company. I've come across someone who I think you should speak to. Have a look at these guys. Your fellow entrepreneurs are good at putting people in touch with one another.
Yes.
And just networks and forums, whether it's entrepreneur organization, whether it's YPO, whether it's Civitas locally. There are a lot of networks that you can hang out around and just get to know the people you need to, whether it's investors or potentially mentors.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to add? Because I think we are running out of time, so I want to open some questions to our audience in case they have something. All right. Okay. Is there anyone in our audience who has any questions to pose? I'll take 4 questions. Sorry, can we just hand one of the microphones to this gentleman on the left-hand side? There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just like to add what Abu just referred to now. When we did our angel investing, we actually landed 3 angel investors on a platform called the Angel Investment Network, which we Googled, found it, listed our company, and got 3 investments from there. So that's also a good channel to look at. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much for that. Is there anyone perhaps in the center that would like to pose a question to our panel?
Only because I've got it in my hand. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. In Abu, in one of your slides, it showed a low number of deal flows, which was a concern to you. To what extent was that about the quality of the pitches that you were seeing versus the actual number?
Yes, so I get 150-ish applications on a monthly basis, and a lot of those are like, I run a transport business and my truck broke down. Can you help me buy a new truck? And so we get 150 in a month. We share roughly 3 with our network on a monthly basis, and we typically fund 1 every month or every second month. That's the funnel that we unfortunately work with. And I think part of that is the quality of the deal flow that we are seeing as well.
Thank you.
All right, okay, there's a gentleman right there on the left-hand side. I think he has a question.
Thanks. Hi, Tammy from, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Hi.
Closer.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi, Tammy from OE Medical Card. So my question is, through my experience and journey, I've realized or learned personally that that early stage investing is quite intimate, in the sense that that's when a lot of things break. That's when a lot of assumptions tend to not go the way that you thought. And I find that having an external investor or external party with you in this journey at that early stage can also become almost troublesome if you are not sharing the same vision, the same pains, the same objectives. And the question then is, from a Jozi angel investors perspective, is how does then one make sure that that marriage there is one that is going to be healthy, in the sense that this person is going to share with you not only just by putting money and asking you every month what's happened to my money, but also making sure that they're understanding of that very, very turbulent journey?
Tammy, I told you before, no difficult questions. Yeah, look, I think it's important to date before you get married, and get to know the person who's investing in your business. And this is what I spoke about in that reverse due diligence process. You got to get to know each other. Make sure that there is the synergy, but also there's a common understanding of where this business is going. And there are lots of moving parts in a startup, unfortunately. And 1 minute you're targeting higher education institutions, the next minute you're targeting secondary schools, and that's just a pivot you needed to make to stay alive. And the way the market has received your solution. It's just, I think that it's important. Communication is super important. And as long as there's logic in your reasoning and it makes sense, I think there's flexibility from an investor's perspective. And it doesn't have to be monthly. When we speak, whenever Zulé needs something, and then I feed that information back to my angel network. We haven't had guys knocking on Zulé's door saying, what's happening, where you at, on a regular basis. I think those check-ins are helpful from both perspectives to understand where you're at, what help you can use at this point in time, what are your challenges. But also, I mean, if you're going through another funding round, and this is the most recent conversation we had, is, can we participate in that funding round? And it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have regular conversations. So communication is super important, before, during, and after.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, you can.
I love what you said, Abu, about dating before you're getting married. I mean, you don't get married on the first date. If I can add, and this is not only startups and investors, but as human beings, we are really not good about talking about our expectations from each other in relationships. And I think the reason for that is that we don't always understand our own motivation and exactly what it is we want from something. And the worst thing you can have in a business relationship is like a misalignment of that, and that's exactly what you're referring to. So having a very frank conversation about like, listen, what do you want to get out of this in 5 years from now? Do you want R1 billion? Do you just want to be part of a journey of making a positive impact? Like, what is it? And I think one of the reasons why we avoid those conversations is we're afraid that the answer might not be what we want to hear. And then we go, well, what next? So let's say you have an angel investor that's interested to give you the money you need. If you were to discover that their interest is completely misaligned with what you want to do, well, then you're back to square one. You have to find a new investor, right? But can I encourage you that you're probably better off not taking that money and actually just moving on to trying to find someone that aligns with what you want to do? And I think that is a very important conversation to have, and it's something that naturally develops as a relationship develops. But if there's no time for a relationship to develop, then have that conversation. Like, what is the expectation?
I want to add to that. Never make the decision out of desperation. That's why it's so important to have that relationship before, because it's about values. It's about values. If your core values aren't aligned, if your core values and your investors' core values aren't aligned, it's not going to work long term. And it's a marriage. It's a marriage. Once you're in it, it's a serious relationship. So don't make a decision to take funding out of desperation. Yeah.
And a final thought, just, sometimes someone is in it to make money. And what I find frustrating is people don't want to admit that. And if that is what someone's in for and they admit it, it's much easier to find someone else that's also in it for the money, and they can work together and actually just do it for the money. But if there's a misalignment between purpose for money and purpose for something else, then it doesn't work. So, I always want to encourage investors. If the only reason you're doing it is to make money, then tell people that. Because it's not going to work if you try to pretend it's not about making money. It's about something else, and, down the line, the relationship breaks down.
I'm going to jump in here. Sorry. So my question is to Abu, a straightforward one, talking about the importance of relationships and things. What do you think about the matching platforms? So we had mention of the angel matching platform. If it's about building a relationship, if you can Google a matching platform and pick it up quickly, is that working? It's a bit like speed dating. Does it work?
Yeah, I built one out 2013 through to 2016, and had partners in Latin America, had partners in Asia. We actually scaled that to 37 countries. And what we found is that the introduction is such a small part in the whole investment process. We took weeks, if not months, to actually flesh out what the deal looked like. And people then try and charge for making that introduction. And it's just such a low value to the whole deal that there's not enough of a business model for that matching platform to actually be sustainable. Look, I think it's helpful. I think it's as long as you're finding your sustainability elsewhere. Any means of accessing more capital, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be the angel platform that Hein was speaking about earlier, is helpful. I wouldn't pay someone, though, to put me in touch with someone else.
Makes perfect sense, actually. I think we've ran out of time, unfortunately, but yeah, so we can't take any more questions. But I think maybe just closing comments quickly in like 1 minute. Renier, is there anything you want to say?
No, I just think it's an exciting time in our startup ecosystem. I think a lot more great entrepreneurs coming through doing great things and a lot of opportunities. So angel investors, be on the lookout, because I think there's a lot of exciting things happening and a lot of exciting things to be part of coming up.
Thank you for that. And Zulé?
If you never reach out, the answer is always going to be no.
True.
Yeah, so reach out. What do you really have to lose?
I can relate to that, actually. Abu?
Yeah, I think there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in South Africa.
100%.
I think that the funding landscape is maturing. Events like this, it's happening more and more regularly. I think we are really at the very early stages of where we can be as an innovation economy. My concern is that we're seeing other African markets, we're seeing other developed markets move a lot faster than we are and adopt these new technologies, these new innovations a lot faster than we are. And I think we just need to capture this opportunity, grab it, and run with it as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it, and that was very insightful. I'm sure everyone who's here walked away with, something that they can use in their level of expertise. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Renier, Zulé, Abu.